If you ask critics, they'll tell you that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. Interestingly, my guest today actually agrees. Freddie, CEO of BHODL and former City of London lawyer, argues that Bitcoin isn't valuable because of what it is, but because of what it does. It tells the truth every 10 minutes in a way that no bank and no government can manipulate. From the metaphysical nature of sending an idea you can no longer control to the UK's massive legislative shift that recognizes 12 words in your head as actual legal property, this conversation goes deep into why Bitcoin is an accounting revolution and the most profound monetary discovery of our time. And stick around to learn why banning Bitcoin is absolutely absurd. If a government tried to make holding a private key illegal, you could turn every person in a room into a criminal just by shouting 12 words. If you're enjoying my content, it would mean a lot to me if you could subscribe to the channel and like my video to support my journey. Thanks a lot. Now let's dive into this episode. All right, Freddie New, welcome back to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Lovely to be back, Bram.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here. I think you are a great person to talk to about, I'd say bigger picture Bitcoin thinking, but also, from your point of view from the UK, like what is happening there. So I'm excited to chat because, you spent, I think about like 3 years campaigning with the Bitcoin Policy Institute. And I kind of wanted to just start with, what is kind of the moment where you realized that something was actually happening? Like, I think it's called the FCA, like Financial Conduct Authority, right? It feels like something is happening. And I talk about this a lot. I'm just so interested, fascinated about the fact that, you would say the Bitcoin use case, and the thesis, etc., is very logical, but you see, in the bigger scheme of things, and especially policy-wise, things go very slowly. But now it seems like something is happening. So I thought that would be a nice point to start.
Fantastic. And yeah, you're completely right. It's almost exactly 3 years to the day since we founded Bitcoin Policy UK. And it's been quite a long and arduous fight. And initially, it seemed hard to ascertain that we were making any progress. But to talk about it from a positive perspective for a change, there are a number of things that have happened in the UK which counterintuitively, I think, may have given us some cause for hope. One such one I've tweeted about in the past, it's the fact that, strangely, Bitcoin is now officially recognized as a form of property under English law. And I got very excited about this when this happened, because you remember I was a lawyer by training. And if you want to geek out over English property law, this is quite an interesting thing to geek out over. That I won't geek out too much. There were two different types of property under English law. One was something like a contract, which is a right, something that you can enforce in court. And the other is a thing, which is called a shows in possession, like my pen is a shows in possession. And the Law Commission realized that Bitcoin doesn't really fit into either of those buckets. It's not a liability, so it's not a contract or anything like that, and it's not a tangible physical thing. And so they helped to draft this very clever piece of legislation, which effectively creates this new third category of property, which could include your 12 words or your 24 words, which you hold in your head, which are neither a contract nor a physical thing. So that's fantastic. We took a bit of a punch to the face from the FCA when they classified Bitcoin as what's called a restricted mass market investment. We did push back very hard against that. The consequence of that for people in the UK is that if you're looking to buy Bitcoin on an exchange, you have to do a quiz first. You have to answer questions about what you're buying. In some ways, and that's not bad. You should probably do your research before you buy anything. But it created a lot of friction for people to buy it in the UK, and also meant that a lot of businesses either left the UK or didn't open here in the first place. But you mentioned some positives. It seems to be that the FCA shot their wad with that restricted mass market investment definition, and they've been on the back foot against a lot of the industry advocacy since then. Some of the things I might flag, they were going to try and restrict your ability to buy Bitcoin with a credit card. That's gone. They say they're not going to try and enforce that anymore. They're also backtracking a little bit on what are called some of the conduct of business regulations. saying that in some cases those may not apply to Bitcoin or cryptocurrency firms, opening the market a little bit. And for me, one of the most positive things that I found when I was reviewing the legislation, they appear to have listened to all of our arguments, saying that mining is not a financial service and shouldn't be regulated, and node running is not a financial service and shouldn't be regulated. And that should also include running Lightning nodes. And that word is actually in the draft legislation, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm thinking about maybe you could explain a bit more about like that third or new way of defining it as property. And I want to relate to a tweet I saw, I think it was today, by Knut Svanholm. I thought it was very interesting. I won't read the whole tweet, or maybe I will. Let's see how long it takes. But he said, and I've been thinking about that a lot, and also wonder what you think, right? Like the 12 words of a private key, right? They are not a password. Like they are the actual access, right? They are the, like if you possess the 12 words, you also have the thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's not access to the thing. It is the thing, which is sounds like a small, but it is a significant difference, right? So Knut tweeted, some governments tell you that you have to declare, I'm doing air quotes, declare that you, again, air quotes, own a Bitcoin. Now, how do you do that, right? And so he says, in short, if you know a private key that allows you to request the network to apply a specific alteration to the time chain that you which basically is moving the thing, right? So then the time chain changes basically. But how can knowledge of that be equivalent to the ownership? So what happens when you say the keys in, like the private key in court, right? So these 12 magic words are, again, not the password, but the thing. So when you say it in court, then everyone in court is then guilty of owning the Bitcoin that is the subject of whatever the court case is about, right? So how do you prove that everyone else on Earth doesn't know the same 12 words, right? So that you are the only one that owns it. Does that make sense? Like I love that idea, because he says, I'll finish. Under man-made law, Bitcoin ownership is a paradox. Under natural law, the key holder simply is the owner. No declaration is required, and no state is needed to validate it. So, what do you think about that, and how does that tie into maybe how it's defined right now? Because I find this extremely fascinating, right? Because eventually Bitcoin is just code and it's just words. Like you can look at the whole BIP 360 list, right? That is all the Bitcoin that ever exists. So yeah, I thought it would be a fun topic to ask you about.
That's a super interesting one. And it's funny, I read that tweet myself, and I think I replied to it with a silly example. You could shout bacon 12 times in court and that would have that effect. You know the bacon wallet?
No.
I mean, oh, dude. Sorry, random tangent. The bacon, 12 words, 12 bacons is an actual wallet. Someone found it ages ago, and it's just become a meme. So people are continually like dropping Bitcoin into it, but it's continually monitored and it's always being swept because it's like an open secret.
It's public. Yeah.
But yeah, you could go into court and shout bacon 12 times, and then everyone in court will control that private key because it's an easy one to remember. I think what's super interesting about what Knut says there is that there's, for me, and again as a lawyer, there's a differentiation between control and ownership in that sense. So if I had purchased Bitcoin and put it into a wallet, then that is my Bitcoin. And even if I tell someone else that private key, it doesn't become their Bitcoin, even though they can control it. So maybe an analogy is if I have a key to my car and I create multiple copies of my car key and then hand them out to people, the car is still legally mine because I bought and paid for it. And if anyone else takes the car and drives it away without my permission, then although they're controlling it, there's a difference in the legitimacy of that control. So it's not their car. Yeah. And so
they would have stolen it,
yes,
basically.
Yeah, exactly.
What you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So the interesting thing arises if the ownership of a private key becomes illegal, and I think that's the That's probably the heart of what Knut's post was about. So if let's take an extreme example. If a government attempts to outlaw Bitcoin or to make the holding of a private key illegal, you can literally cause everyone to commit that crime by shouting bacon 12 times, and and you'll get to a point where the absurdity of the law is so clear, and the unenforceability of that law. Let's develop the idea. Let's make it an imprisonable offense to have a private key.
Yeah, we just take out an ad.
Yes.
And everyone reads the ad, right? Like in all the newspapers, we put it on TV. It's just bacon, 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 bacon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You wouldn't be able to go into the meat section of a supermarket or a store without immediately committing that crime. So as soon as you see the shelf full of bacon, you've immediately committed the crime.
If something happened to you tomorrow, could your family access your Bitcoin? Not probably, not they'd figure it out, but with certainty. I've thought about this a lot. Whatever custody solution you are using, inheritance is the piece most people haven't solved yet. Billions in Bitcoin have already been lost because someone died without a plan. With OnRamp, inheritance planning is built directly into your custody setup. Your Bitcoin stays segregated and in your control, secured across independent institutions in multiple jurisdictions, insured through Lloyd's of London, and accessible to the people you choose when they need it. And it doesn't matter where in the world you or they are. You can book a free consultation to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/Bram. That's onrampbitcoin.com/Bram. Most people stop too early with Bitcoin. They buy it, maybe move it to a wallet and think they are done. But they're not. The real questions are how you're securing it, how private your setup is, and whether you're verifying your own transactions or trusting someone else. And what happens to your Bitcoin when something happens to you? This is the layer that most people ignore, and it's the most important one. That's why I've been working with the Bitcoin Way. They help you set up self-custody properly, including privacy, cybersecurity, inheritance, and even running your own node. And they do it without ever touching your Bitcoin. They're not a custodian. They're your support team. If you're serious about this like I am, go to thebitcoinway.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to book a free call. They'll walk you through your setup, personalize everything to you, and help you get a much stronger position very quickly, whether you're a beginner or more advanced. That's thebitcoinway.com/Bram.
So I think for me, the idea of legitimacy of ownership is where the crime comes in. You know, I can't legitimately take your Bitcoin unless you give me permission to do that. If you told me the private key and said, "Yeah, Freddie, this wallet is for you," that's fine. But otherwise, that's not okay. That's still theft. And the interesting thing about bringing it back to the UK's recent change in law, if I found your private key at home and then I went off and I emptied your wallet, English law would protect you now. You could go to the police and you could say, "Freddie broke into my house, he took my 12 words, and he swept my wallet." Because it's validly recognized as property under English law, the police will now investigate me and arrest me, and they can force me to give that key back. So it's a really interesting, nuanced technical point. And if anything, I think it's the absurdity of the point Knut's making really is some protection against governments trying to ban it, because it's impossible.
Yeah, it's also so interesting why Bitcoin is so profound, right? Like it is nowhere and everywhere at the same time. I think Knut was actually the first person who told me, you know, if you put a private key in a vault in Switzerland and you have the public key, you can send value to a vault in Switzerland, right? That's mind blowing. Is there kind of like a cascade or I want to say a pyramid? I think cascade is better, as to how you can kind of like logically articulate why banning is futile, right? Like what you just said, like the definition of the fact that Bitcoin is a new form of property, which I didn't know about. So thanks for sharing like how that's done in the UK. Is that kind of like a primitive for everything else? Or yeah, like how could you think about it? Do you understand what I mean? Like,
yeah, 100%. I think you're completely right, actually. The way that the legislation is drafted, and if anyone wants to pull it up, it's very easy to read. It's just one page. It's a classic piece of English law drafting. It's one of the few things that Britain is good at, drafting laws. They say that a thing shall not be prevented from being property by virtue of being neither a chosen action, a contract, nor a chosen possession, a thing. And so what it does is it's an inclusive definition. It's not an exclusive definition, which means that arguably even an idea could be property under this. And for me, I find the concept of Bitcoin as an idea is so fascinating, particularly in the context of sending Bitcoin. I wrote about this a long time ago, actually. It's the concept that Bitcoin is like an idea that I can only have once. If I have Bitcoin and I send it to you, then it's not like an idea where I can tell you an idea and then both of us have that same idea in our heads.
Correct. Yes.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's like a unique
yes.
element of an idea, which if I sign a transaction with my private key and send Bitcoin to you, I can no longer control that in any shape, form, or respect. And I find that concept, I mean, you begin to get into very sort of metaphysical ideas around what exactly it is we're dealing with here. But I find that absolutely fascinating.
I have a lot more questions, but I want to keep on this track because, it is to connect it to your background, right? Like you have law, which is, you can take it literally, right? Which is the whole sometimes the whole idea of a law, right? And sometimes you have this legal text that is, the classic legal speak where there's a lot of words, but the kind of conclusion is, well, this applies to everything, right? So I'm covering everything, like all my liabilities, like literally all my liabilities are covered, even when we're talking about one, right? Like that's how I could like mush the words. But with Bitcoin, it is always the literal thing. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Like, it's also very interesting to think about like your Bitcoin and my Bitcoin and everyone else's Bitcoin is all like unique, right? Like if you take all the Bitcoin that exists, I have this sliver and you have that sliver. Like I always visualize it as like a wall of bank vaults.
Nice.
And I have bank vault X, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. And you have bank vault 321 and 1762. And this kind of like attempt at visualization is not enough, right? Because like you said, it's metaphysical. So it's the visualization is flawed, right? Because what you're saying is that and this is also in what Knut said, right? And what you said, the words actually change the blockchain, right? So if my words go to you, it alters the entire state of almost, I don't know, like all the letters and numbers. I'm trying to describe it, right? And that is very profound because, it's there or not. Like you said, it's not a shared idea. Like we can have, I can share my idea with you, and then we both own the idea, like the combination of words in our head. But when it comes to Bitcoin, it can be in my head, but it's not. I don't have it.
It's extraordinary,
which is very strange. It's very strange.
It is. If we were still in a society that sort of believed in magic, that's really what it would feel like. It's as though, and the whole cultural history of magic, again being slightly esoteric for a moment, is around the idea of correct speaking and spells. Spell is actually an old form for word, and the idea that you. And Der Gigi is very, very good on this. His old writings, I really miss him.
Yes, yes. Bitcoin is time.
Yes, Bitcoin is time. Bitcoin is speech. Bitcoin is sending. Bitcoin is sending a message. But unlike email, it's a message that can only be sent once and once I have sent it, I can't call it back. I can't then forward that on to someone else. So, for example, if we're using an analogy when we're speaking to a politician or a regulator about the email protocol. It's very important to distinguish the email protocol as SMTP from the Bitcoin protocol. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of non-technical and non-Bitcoin people struggle to understand. We're used to this world of endlessly copyable digital abundance, where any picture can be right-clicked and saved down, any email can be forwarded, any film can be pirated. It's very difficult for someone who's become habituated to that world to understand that Bitcoin is digital uniqueness, it's digital scarcity. And that, like we said with the ideas, once I've told my Bitcoin to you, I can't tell it to anyone else. Gigi should write another article on this. I think the world needs it.
Well, and then to tie it back to what you mentioned about the FCA admitting that, you know, mining and running a node aren't regulated financial services, which I think it does tie into this, right? So because what do you actually do as a miner or a node, right? What with these words and this code, it is again so interesting that this is it's so outside of the current paradigm, right? Because the current paradigm is you know, there's policy, there's like a start and an end, and there's a fence around it, and you know, we can kind of like set the rules, we can change the rules, right? But with Bitcoin, it's just a set of rules, which you know, people, you know, the people that participate in the Bitcoin network are incentivized not to change, obviously. So how do we connect this to how they label mining and running nodes, right? Not being a financial service. Like, why is this so important?
So in terms of labeling, maybe to start there, we've been consistent in our explanations over time that validation of transactions is different from mining, and trying to explain in very simple terms that what the miners do is they determine the order of transactions. And once, as you and I know, but they may not, once a transaction has been mined into a block, and once a certain number of blocks are mined on top of that block, it effectively becomes impossible to reverse. Obviously, occasionally you do get competing blocks, but then as we know, you will get an orphan block, and then the time chain will revert to a single sequence of blocks. So for non-technical people in these kind of institutions, explaining to them exactly how mining works, with transactions being scooped up from the mempool, then hashed, and then subsequently determined. Determining the sequence of transactions is quite a simple way to explain it. And then also explaining that nodes, in the vast majority of cases nowadays, don't mine, but they validate transactions. They check that you have the Bitcoin that you are sending me from your UTXO. They check that it's properly signed with your private key, et cetera, et cetera. And once they're valid and they have that tick, then they can go into the mempool. And as soon as it then becomes apparent that neither of these activities relate to any form of financial services that a regulator would recognize, it then becomes logically consistent that they are not financial services.
Yeah. My big thought around this is, and I love that we touched upon this, it is the value is like on top of this process that we are talking about, right? So the value is derived from the fact that this process works like this. You know, you have the ledger, which is, you know, literally the book with the letters and the numbers, right? And the book is being updated, or there's stuff being added or changed to the book every 10 minutes, and then that's the miners, and then you have the nodes that validate that this is the book. And that is basically just it, right? It's just letters and numbers in a sequence that is agreed upon, right? That's the consensus part. And I think the value comes from the fact that there's nothing in the world that is like that, right? And anyone can put in, let's call it a request to change the numbers and the letters, right? Which is my transaction to you, for example, because I control a certain combination of letters. It's so funny, right? Like, it is so fucking basic, but so profound, right? And it's just data. Like, it's literally a data file, right? I don't know what the blockchain is right now, like 500, 700 gigs, doesn't really matter. And the fact that that data is agreed upon continuously, right, and being secured more and more and more continuously, that is where the value comes from, because you can use this accounting system. I'm still trying to get Darren Feinstein, you know Darren Feinstein?
Oh, yeah.
I still have, you know, he will be on the podcast, but he's talking about, you know, triple entry bookkeeping and stuff like that, right? Like, that is this, right? So if you know that the book is true and the only change to the book is done by actual consensus plus, is done by proof of work and actual consensus so that it becomes immutable, right? The text in the book, basically, that is the revolution. And there's nothing like that exists in the world. And that is why this is valuable, right? So when you take it back to the argument that you mentioned, right? Like, they are not conducting the financial action, basically, right? They are just updating the book, and other people are applying or participating in the consensus, right? But the value is a separately derived or agreed upon thing.
You've said so much interesting stuff there. Absolutely fascinating. But I think maybe picking up the value point first, you're completely correct. And often when people say, they say, oh, Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, I'll say, well, yeah, I actually kind of agree with you. Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. It's true.
The function has value. The function of it has value.
Exactly right. For me, Bitcoin represents value. And the representation of the value, the more value accrues to the time chain by virtue of what you said. You know, the process that speaks truth every 10 minutes, that tells all participants in the network what changes have taken place in the preceding 10 minutes, and which no one can manipulate or game or corrupt in any way. That is where the value lies, and that's why value has been attributed to it. But we forget, you know, for the first 2 years of its life, Bitcoin had no market price at all. There was no value at all. It was just processing this information. It was updating the time chain. Truth was being spoken every 10 minutes, but no one cared. And it's funny as well to imagine if humans became extinct today, or all humans vanished. For as long as our computers were still running and our nodes were still validating and the power stayed on, there would probably be a little time when this was just happening automatically and empty blocks are being mined because no humans are making transactions anymore. And there would be no value attributed to those Bitcoin, because the things that attribute the value are you and I, the humans, who have decided that our time and energy and work is represented in this time chain.
For my European friends that want to buy Bitcoin with ease, check out Relay. I've been a longtime fan and happy to partner up with what I think is the best Bitcoin-only platform for Europeans. They offer a super simple, beginner-friendly app with no distractions and no shitcoins. You can do a quick one-time smash buy or set up automatic purchases when you're stacking regularly. And here's the thing that matters most. Relay is 100% self-custody. Every set you hold is yours. Your keys, your coins. If you want to get started, download the app via my link below or in the description and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, at checkout to get 10% off your fees. Every Bitcoiner hits this moment. You need cash. Maybe a house deposit, an emergency, or a tax bill, and you're staring at your stack thinking, do I really want to sell this? Here's the thing, you don't have to. You can borrow against your Bitcoin instead, so there's also no taxable event and your stack can keep on stacking. This is where Firefish comes in, a peer-to-peer marketplace for Bitcoin-backed loans. And Firefish isn't a lender. They built the protocol that makes this all possible, which is exactly why they never, ever have to touch your Bitcoin. During your loan, your Bitcoin sits in an on-chain multisig secured by open source code. You can easily create a loan request with your desired amount, duration, and interest rate and share it on their marketplace at firefish.io. When you get matched and decide to accept a loan offer, you can use code BRAM to get 30% off your first loan's fees. That's firefish.io and code BRAM. Yeah, for sure. And this is also the argument against, people saying like, what if the EMP or what if the nuclear thing or blows up, right? Or what if there's a meteor or whatever? The point you're making is that as long as there are two nodes, right, and there is consensus on the book, then once the network grows again, right, and the fun thing is that it can basically never die because the oldest chain is the one that is, the chain that has the most consensus is the truth, right? So even after a certain time of, global outages in certain places, the fact that all these nodes are distributed in a certain way and can still connect to the network after will make sure that there's an exit or like a certain fork, right? There's a version that's going to be chosen, and that's why it basically lives forever. And the fun thing then you come back to, it's just letters and numbers. That's the crazy thing, right? That is, I want to say easy, right? It's easy to maintain. There are no buildings. There are no, there's no other stuff that you need to maintain. Even when there's a solar flash or whatever, like there are probably miners and nodes in Faraday cages, like in the world, right?
There must be.
So, so that's why it can basically not die. It's just letters and numbers.
Yeah, Blockstream have a satellite in space that runs a full node.
Yeah, that's always my argument.
Yeah.
Also, right? Yeah, exactly. So. Okay, I love that we took this exit, because this is, and I think this is also why this is under discussed, because if we translate that to, you mentioned it correctly, I think, money is a social consensus as well. That's why the what is money question is so important when, we can talk about Bitcoin in this way, but then the relevant question is, okay, but why is this even important, right? Like, why is it important that a ledger is basically incorruptible and therefore verifiable and auditable for anyone who wants to do that without any third party, right? All the way back when people talk about history of money, it is about the ledger, right? It is about the truth of the ledger, and that went back to when people had chains with these things on them, right? Like that, the more tokens you had on your chain, the more people were indebted to you, right? Like it showed your kind of like claim on the ledger, so to say, right? Like it was a way for you to get someone to do something for you, so they could change their position on the ledgers. Yeah,
and those tokens, it's interesting you mentioned those, because tracking back to what we said a few minutes ago, those are exactly the type of property that was already recognized under English law. Those are effectively obligations. They're a form of liability money.
Yes.
And
yeah.
One of the fascinating things about our modern money, fiat money, is that very few people realize that it's essentially all liabilities nowadays. If you read the paperwork from any central bank, they will tell you, banknotes are a liability of the central bank. Government money is a liability of that central bank, and commercial bank money, which is how most money is created nowadays, is what is created when banks make loans. People think that banks take in deposits from you and me and they lend those deposits out. That's really not how money functions at all. It's one of the things that I get so worked up about, particularly, for house prices, back to the title of your podcast, millennials in the UK, it's almost impossible for them to buy houses. One of the reasons house prices are so expensive is because of the ease with which banks were able to create new money for people to get mortgages to buy houses. And so the price of a house was determined not really by how much it was worth, but by how much certain people could borrow in order to bid for them. And that's one of the reasons that their prices are completely out of control.
We're seeing currently, I would say, kind of, we're in the end times of fiat money, right? We can talk forward turning or, cycles, whatever, but I talk about it like we're in the end times of centralization and centralized control, and kind of also seeing that this centralized control doesn't bring what the centralized people in charge are telling you it's bringing, right? And so we see all this kind of crazy stuff going on. Like, for example, a lot of talk about, age gating stuff on the internet, digital IDs in the UK and the EU. And I kind of wanted to ask you, like, how, I have my own idea, but I want to ask you first, like, how does Bitcoin kind of serve as, I want to say like a firewall, against all of this overreach, right? Like they're trying to, the internet's kind of the last decentralized place of information and ideas and stuff like that, right? And you see that they are, trying to move on that. How do you feel about Bitcoin in that picture?
For me, I think the answer to that comes down to one of the fundamental properties of Bitcoin that's always excited me and been most important to me, which is its censorship resistance. I've always had that as the primary importance for me after perhaps the fact that it can't be inflated away or controlled. The idea that I can still make a transaction even if the government wants to stop me making that transaction, for me, is fundamentally important. And I think it's because if you track back all of the different freedoms that we think about that are human rights, most of them are actually downstream from your freedom to transact. And so my freedom to transact at will with you or with anyone else, to spend money, to deploy my time and energy however I see fit, is so fundamentally important to all other freedoms that it's so big that people often don't recognize it. So to take a simple example, let's say you want to exercise your right to protest. You want to travel on the metro or on a train to go to join a protest, a peaceful protest. If you go to the station and you suddenly find that the government has identified you as a person who might protest and has frozen your bank card, they would prevent you from exercising your rights to free assembly and to free speech very easily. So for me, the extent to which the government is able to reduce its cost of enforcement in imposing its will on its population is extremely dangerous. That they will obviously look to increase their ability to impose their will on us through things like digital ID and age gating. But to your question, the fact that there is a money which they cannot stop and cannot control, and which we can go on using even if they shut everything else down, is it's a sword and a shield, I think. It's a defensive weapon and it's an offensive weapon against government overreach, being completely blunt.
Yeah, and this is also why it's so fun, right? Like something that is purely decentralized and has no rulers is fundamentally just different from anything centralized rulers can attempt to do.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you just made the case why you need Bitcoin right now, right? Like the Bitcoin is not only about preserving time and energy and your wealth, etc. It is literally about opting out of a system where there are central rulers that don't want you to be a player in the game that they control, right? And I think that is kind of like, I always talk about it like this is the little red pill you have to take. Like, you are a pawn in a game that other people play and control.
Yeah.
And you think you are a player while you're, growing up and, becoming an adult and whatever. But once you kind of see that is an illusion, like you have to take action, right? If you don't take the action, you will be stuck being a pawn and like in this endless rat race, just running and standing still, basically.
Yeah, completely right. There's a fantastic quote, isn't there? All it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And I think the huge, it seems globally coordinated push to restrict people's freedom of speech and freedom of thought is unbelievably dangerous. And it is, frankly, it is time for us to say, thus far and no further.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally important for us as free human beings to stand up for our rights. And, it's not always comfortable to do that, but it's something that we must do.
Yeah. Well, this ties back to when we talked about the characteristics of Bitcoin, right? It is speech, it is expression, right? And you can think about that in different ways. I've had Seb Bunny on who said, well, every time you buy something, you're basically expressing your values. I love that. Like you're communicating your values, right? So you can think about it like that, but you can also think about it in the technical issue way that we talked about. Like, yeah, it is just a protocol with letters and numbers. You cannot restrict speech, basically.
No.
And so also back to that tweet of Knut, like I would love to see court cases around this, because like you said, it's just going to show the ridiculousness of what they're trying to do, right? If you can explain deeper than what we talked about, how Bitcoin functions technically, all we're doing is making edits to a shared book.
Yeah. We are.
That's all we're doing.
I don't know if you've ever seen the YouTube clip of someone hashing by hand. It's it's worth digging up. And again, I've quoted Gigi already on this pod, but it's very worthwhile digging up his piece. I think it's called "Implications of Outlawing Bitcoin" or "Implications of Banning Bitcoin," because he goes into these ideas in incredible depth. It's, to this day, one of the best things I've ever read about Bitcoin. And he talks about the impossibility of banning it because it is speech and it is mathematics. And he says in order to ban it, you would need to surveil everyone at all times, everywhere, and prevent them from doing things like flipping a coin in their room or rolling dice or even thinking of 12 random words or observing the flights of birds. Anything that creates entropy can be used to generate a private key. And in fact, I spent a lot of time a couple of years back, before the US elections, trolling Elizabeth Warren, who wanted to ban Bitcoin and ban unhosted wallets, as she called them. She wrote a letter once, a diatribe, as it were, about unhosted wallets. And at Bitcoin Policy, we took the first paragraph of her letter and we used that as entropy to generate a private key. We then did you see it? We posted the wallet QR address on Twitter and said, this, we call it the Warren wallet. This private key is generated by Elizabeth Warren. It's very clever of her to hide a Bitcoin wallet in the first paragraph of her letter like that.
Yes.
And then we raised donations and donated them to Coin Center in the US to push back against her efforts to ban unhosted wallets. So
yeah, but this is how ridiculous it is, right? Like it is almost. I wonder if you've heard anyone talk about it like this, but I don't even know how to call this. I don't even know how to label, whatever Bitcoin enables us to do, right? Like it is. I don't even know. It's like a new thing with words. It's a little ramble, but I don't. It is so opposite. Maybe it goes back to proof of work, right? Like proof of work is in every fractal of Bitcoin. In a fiat world, it's all it's like proof of words or just use of words, right? Like I'm in a certain seat with a certain label, right? Gives me a certain power because it's written down somewhere, right? I'm in position XYZ, and therefore the words coming out of my mouth have a certain weight, right? That other people, peers or below or above me can receive in a certain way because, again, I have a label sitting in a certain seat, right? And with Bitcoin, it is just a total opposite of that. Like you can do it or you can't, basically. There's no one, like you have it or you don't, right? You control it or you don't. So it is way more binary than kind of maybe all the legal speak, right? That you can use to weasel your way through to a certain destination or outcome that you prefer.
Completely right. And honestly, the meme that no one understands Bitcoin is completely true. It's so complicated and it straddles so many different disciplines. Everything you said there is completely correct, but so hard for people to understand. It's hard for me to understand, and I work in the industry. So I can't even imagine how difficult it must be for people who are sitting in government at the moment. I mean, case in point, this afternoon, after this call, I've got a meeting in London, and one of my meetings is with a friend of mine who is in the Foreign Office in London. So he works on the China desk. He loves the People's Republic of China. He is very much of the view that government should control money, and he's a big opponent of Bitcoin. And I've tried many times to explain to him, he doesn't understand how I can send a Bitcoin transaction even if the People's Republic of China doesn't want me to send it. So for him, it's almost worldview breaking. He can't comprehend the idea that two free individuals can transact with each other using these protocols of letters and numbers, and the government can't stop it. It's rather interesting for me to consider why that's so difficult for him to comprehend. I'll try again as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm just thinking about, someone should be in control or something like that, right? Like someone should be in control to do X, Y, Z. And I think what Bitcoiners are just saying and asking is why. Right. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't acknowledge. Like the fact that something exists that can do what you don't think is possible, that should be the signal to you, right? It is already a little signal that you're partially wrong, right? Because we can transact value without any third party having an influence over it, whether it is the interest rate put on the unit that we're using, or the permission for the transaction to go through on my side, for it to go through on your side, right? The fact that you could even use it afterwards, right? There's all these little kind of like checkpoints or gates along the way. And it kind of ties back to Jesse Myers talking about why the uppity elite dismisses Bitcoin, right? It's eventually about like trust. Like, do you have trust in institutions? And I think once you just start asking the question, why should I have trust in institutions? Well, the premise is always nice and interesting and positive and value driven, positive outcome driven, etc. But that is fiat money thinking, because those are words, right? And so once you start asking the question why, and you're going to start looking at the outcomes and then compare the intention with the outcome. That for me is why I mentioned it's red pill, blue pill, because a lot of times if you put these things next to each other, they are not the outcome of the intention, right? It's a different thing. And then when you just keep on questioning why and how and what and where and when, you will figure out that it's just not created for you. It's like created around you. And then you have to make that decision. Like, okay, am I okay with that or not? Like, is there actually a way that I can literally opt out, or at least attempt to opt out, or else, you just have to live with that knowledge infinitely, right? And that would make you very anxious. At least, well, it would make me very anxious if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I like what you said earlier around taking the red pill and realizing that you don't have agency. You are just you think you're a player, but you're actually a pawn. You're being played with, and the system and the people who control the system do not have your best interests at heart. The government in the United Kingdom likes me because I earn money and pay tax and I keep the law.
Yes.
It's that.
I mean, I want to add like apparently and unfortunately, right? Like it is not a nice realization.
No, it's not a nice realization. Governments are supposed to be the servants of their people, not our masters. We live in democratic systems for a reason. But unfortunately, whether or not your system is democratic, it's almost certainly affected by the ability of your banks endlessly to create new money. An idea I've been playing with a lot recently is the idea that value is hard to create, but money is easy to create. And over time, we've conflated money with value. And I love your idea. And I may have to steal this, Bram, but I'll credit you if I do. I love the idea that the value in Bitcoin is derived from the process and the fact that the process, we don't need to trust the process. The process it demonstrably works or it doesn't. The time chain it continues over time or it stops. And the longer it continues, the more we can have faith in the mathematics and in the hardware, and therefore we can attribute more and more value to the tokens that the position of which on the time chain is updated every 10 minutes.
Yeah. Please steal it, because I talked about in my last episodes also about, for example, how Alan Watts talks about money, right? And I'll read it now. I just Googled it. Alan Watts describes money as a symbol, like digits, paper, or ink. It represents wealth rather than being the wealth itself, right? He frequently likened money to a menu and real wealth, food, shelter, enjoyment, to the dinner, arguing that modern civilization suffers from confusing the two and mistakenly eating the menu. To stay on the GG part, this is the map is not the territory. Right, and there's an amazing talk by Jack Mallers, which is called "There Is No Second Best," which is at BTC Prague. So if you search Jack Mallers, "There's No Second Best," he talks about this idea, and there's also the Jack Mallers talk in Madeira, which is an introduction to Bitcoin. I always tell people I was there and I thought, like, I don't have to watch this. This is the introduction. I went there, I watched it. Probably best talk in 10 years of Bitcoin, because he talks about what Gigi talks about. The map is not the territory, right? Like, you're looking at the map and you're standing on the territory, and the map is an abstraction, is an attempt at a representation of the place you're actually at. Same as what Alan Watts says about the menu is a representation of the food, but it's not the food. And what you're saying is, price is not value, right? The amount of units is not the value. And even on, I don't know what is on the English pound, bills, but in the US it says, this bill is what does it say? Like.
The British one says, "I promise to pay the bearer on demand £10 because you used to be able to exchange it for £10 worth of silver." Exactly.
Yeah, so the US dollar bill, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So it already says, like, on the note, that the note is an abstraction of something you can probably not even identify, right? Like, that is layers separated away from you. So whether the bill has a 5, a 10, a 20, or 100, that is just your perception of what you can, like, it's like a collective delusion. But the cool thing with Bitcoin, as we talked about, like the map, the key, as Knut also refers to, the key is the thing, right? The key is the actual thing. Sometimes Knut also says, like, you are the Bitcoin, right? If the words are in your head, like, you are actually the Bitcoin, like that goes even further out there. But I agree with it, right? And that's the difference. Like, Bitcoin is the map and the territory in one thing. And therefore it would be a way better tool to actually determine the value. There, the price would be the value.
Yeah, it's a ruler that isn't continually being lengthened and shortened arbitrarily by people outside your purview and your control.
So I think we've been talking positively about what Bitcoin, brings and kind of, how it combats this, kind of like centralized quackery, I would almost want to say. What in your mind is kind of like a version of the future that most people are kind of like missing in this, let's call it centralized versus decentralized kind of battle and these attempts, this age gating, digital IDs, stuff like that. Just, for me, it's, like I said, it's kind of the end of this pendulum of centralization, and therefore it's just chaotic. Like, they're just scrambling to keep it all together. But yeah, how do you look at the future?
I'm not entirely optimistically. I'm a long-term optimist, but possibly a short-term pessimist. So on digital ID, we've mentioned a couple of times, there's clearly a globally coordinated push to try and restrict, I think, people's freedom of thought and freedom of speech And the way that they're approaching this is, oh, why don't someone think of the children? So certainly in the UK with the Online Safety Act.
The cheapest argument, I always say.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Like, who doesn't agree with that?
Yes,
right?
exactly. Everyone wants to protect children, so let's make sure that we have everyone ID'd. Funnily enough, I also like protecting children. The argument we've consistently made is that age gating the internet is not the right way to do it, that protecting children starts with parents at home, and if it's much, much easier for you to have router-based restrictions on what your children can look at online in your home, which you can control, without giving your identity to a centralized database, which will almost certainly be hacked and stolen. So I don't need to go into the vast number of examples of this happening. It's absolutely all over the place. Maybe a funny story instead. So the Online Safety Act has required all kinds of websites in the UK to age gate their services to children. A really interesting report came out in the last week. It's worth looking up. It turns out that children have been getting around the face scanning, for example, by drawing moustaches on their faces with eyebrow pencils. And
really?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So you have politicians thinking that they're going to come up with this brilliant piece of legislation, which, as you say, they're just words written by people in Parliament. Websites then desperately try and either comply or, as in the case of 4chan, for example, just ignore it, because the English law is not enforceable over Americans' freedom of speech. Americans have much better freedom of speech protections than we do in the United Kingdom, and they are not subject to British laws at all. And then you have clever children who are either using VPNs or drawing moustaches on their faces with pencils. Well done, children. And I think making the point into a slightly more serious one, laws should be fair, just, and enforceable. And if it becomes apparent that a law is completely unenforceable, then it needs to be rewritten and revised. And so that is the longer-term optimism that I hope to see with the Online Safety Act. It's going to become so obvious that it's completely unenforceable and unworkable that over time, I think it will have to be amended and hopefully repealed. But that's going to take a reasonable battle in the medium term.
Yeah. Well, this is what makes me very positive about the future, right? Like a lot of the things that we've talked about now will be brought to light even more, right? Mm-hmm. And get to the essence of what Bitcoin actually is. And I think it'll also kind of like spill over in these other topics that you just alluded to, right? Because if something can exist like this for money, it also kind of shows the ridiculousness of any other, policy wording that has no, how do you say it?
In the real world,
substantial value in the physical world.
Yeah, completely right. Actually, a bit of a spoiler. Bitcoin Policy we're about to release a sort of privacy toolkit, which covers not just use of Bitcoin privately, but also how to ensure that you're set up with a VPN. If, for example, age gating is brought in at the OS level on your computer, what kind of operating systems can you use in order to ensure that you don't need to give your identity to a centralized database? That's going to be published in the next few days, and hopefully by the time this podcast is out, that will be out there online. And one of the things we talk about in there is obviously Nostr. I've been working with an AI agent, an OpenClaw agent, for some time. The first thing I used it for actually was to demonstrate to Liz Kendall, who's responsible for these policy areas in the UK. She's a minister, to demonstrate to her that it's impossible to ban children from social media because my agent called Claudia, I instructed it to go to Nostr, create a key pair, and then begin posting. And Claudia posts every day. She checks Nostr daily at lunchtime, and within certain parameters I gave her, she can say whatever she likes. And no one can stop her. No one can restrict her freedom of speech. And her first post was literally trolling the British government, saying, they want to try and age gate the internet. They can't even restrict me, and I'm not even a person.
Yeah, or I'm a week-old bot.
Exactly. She literally said, I'm 5 days old, and already I haven't
That's very funny.
or social media profile.
I love that. To kind of wrap up, you've had a foot in, I would say, both the old legal world and this new Bitcoin world, the old finance world, the new finance world. What is something that is very clear for you, let's say, about the next decade that you think a lot of people still miss?
I think a lot of, again, maybe this is an optimistic point. I think a lot of people underestimate quite how exciting the world is going to be. There's a lot of doomerism about at the moment. There's a lot of fear about what AI is going to do, about jobs that are going to disappear. Maybe I'm naive, but I'm strangely excited by this. And I think some people are missing that sense of excitement. The idea that we're entering into a world where it is going to be possible for anyone in the world to transact with anyone else using a global digital money in the same way that we can communicate with anyone else anywhere in the world, as long as they have a smartphone and a Wi-Fi or satellite connection. The kind of opportunities that opens up are extraordinary. The fact that you and I can send money to a friend in Zambia or in South America or in Bali, and we can work on the same thing, the same projects, the same ideas. I'm immensely excited by that. And I am also excited by the idea of kind of a hybrid world where humans are working increasingly with AI agents to, I suppose, mutual benefit rather than in competition with each other.
I like that. All right. If you had 30 minutes to convince high-level policymaker that Bitcoin is a profound technological discovery rather than just an investment, where would you start? That's
a fantastic question. I think I might start with the fundamental point that we made earlier, that we are all mentally habituated to the idea that digital things are easily copied and therefore completely abundant. So getting into your head the idea that a Bitcoin cannot be copied and cannot be easily replicated. So many of the properties of Bitcoin are downstream from that idea. The fact that there is one transaction record, there is one statement of truth every 10 minutes, and that can't be changed by a central bank, can't be changed by a commercial bank, can't be changed by law enforcement. I think if you grasp that idea, then a lot of the other pieces also fall into place.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's interesting. Well, I hope you have the chance soon enough to do that more, and I'm very excited to see where this is all going to go. Like for now, I want to thank you for your time. I thought this was really great, and also it went as I thought, because I had a lot of other questions, but with you, we always get into this direction and then a bit deeper. And I think this was really great, and I hope more people will talk about Bitcoin like this. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon.
Bram, thanks so much. I love chatting with you. It was a super pleasure, and thank you so much for having me back on.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode. Bye.